So hello and welcome. I'm Stacy Costell, the CEO for the Coalition for College. And today you will hear from 3 Coalition member schools on behind the scenes of the admission selection process. So I'd like to welcome my panelists. Can each of you introduce yourself, the institution you represent, and a bit about your school? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Tokuhama. I am a Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. We're located about half an hour north of downtown Chicago, and we're a mid-sized private liberal arts research institution with about 8,000 undergraduate students. One of the things that I like to highlight about our school is that we talk about research a lot, and we actually have a $3.5 million undergraduate research fund for undergraduate students.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Gonzalez. I serve as Associate Director for Diversity Recruitment at Williams College in Western Massachusetts. We're located in Williamstown, Massachusetts, right on the border of New York State and Vermont. And one of my favorite things about Williams is that as a small liberal arts college, we have lots of small classes, but the coolest style of a class that you can take is a tutorial. It's a class that's offered with just 2 students and 1 professor.
Great. Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Taggart. I am a Senior Recruitment Coordinator from the University of Michigan. We are a large public research institution located in the city of Ann Arbor, which is about 45 minutes from the city of Detroit. We have approximately 30,000 undergraduate students on campus with about 6,800 in the first year class. And we are known for our many academic programs and opportunities along with our strong school spirit. Go Blue!
Great, thank you. So Stephanie, let's start with you. Many schools use the word holistic when talking about the admissions process. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And certainly you'll hear the word holistic thrown around a lot as you go through your college search process. Holistic is really thinking about all of the various aspects of a student's application that is going to affect a student's decision at that particular institution. So to give you a sense, admission officers will work together and review and consider absolutely everything in a student's application file. So their background and lived experiences, their talents, their courses, the grades that they've received in those classes, the essays that they've written, letters of recommendation that schools receive from their teachers, their counselors, really taking all of those components that a student has put into their application into consideration as they're thinking about how that student is going to transition to their college campus and really become a part of their college community. We like to talk a lot about how at Williams it's a microcosm of the greater world, and we think about that a lot on all of our college campuses. How can we sort of bring students together into this little microcosm of the world so that they can really live, learn, and thrive on our campuses? And holistic admission allows us to do that.
Thank you. Chris, what are the most important factors when evaluating an applicant? How important are grades versus honors and advanced coursework? Should a student take a risk and enroll in a course that they may struggle in?
Sure. So the question kind of what's most important is going to differ by institution. So if a student's going out to a college fair or they have a chance to talk to one of the college reps, it's a great question to ask because every school is going to weight things a little bit differently. They're going to have different priorities. And so I think it's a fair question to ask, but one that is going to be different across different schools. As Stephanie was talking about with the holistic review, there are many components that we look at. So there are different things that are weighted in terms of things like academic performance and classes taken. So to get to your second question about kind of grades and performance, we get this question a lot, and hopefully my colleagues can commiserate. Whenever we're out at college fairs, we always get really, eager students are like, should I take an AP class and perhaps, get a B or take a regular class and get an A? My joke answer to them is that you should take the AP class and get an A. And it's really a case where what we want to see from a student is that they've challenged themselves in the curriculum available at their high school. So the larger question that we're trying to answer is how did this particular student prepare herself or himself for college, right? What kinds of classes did they take? How did the student do in those? Did the student engage in any kinds of other learning opportunities outside of the classroom to help prepare for that transition to college? So when you're trying to answer that question, all those are the kinds of questions that we're thinking about in the back of our head. Similarly, if a student is taking a risk and saying, I really am interested in a class and perhaps want to take it, but I might not do so well. For us in a holistic process, that's the context that we're looking at. We're looking at things like letters of recommendation. You could write about it in your option. case where we want to understand, why did you decide that it was worthy to push yourself in that area, and take smart risks? Because I think when we're taking a look at the larger picture, it's a sense of judgment, right, on the application. We're trying to evaluate how a student made a series of choices, because a student's going to have to make similar choices about their educational future in college. The one last thing to wrap up with is, I think a lot of folks in the process think about things like transcripts and performance in terms of backward looking, that admission officers will amass all this information and sort of render a verdict based on these, attributes and performance. What I would argue instead is that I think fundamentally we are a forward-looking profession, that we are trying to predict student success on our schools, on our campuses, on our classroom, and we're using these markers, things like performance on a transcript, to imagine how you're going to perform in a classroom if we admit you to our respective institutions.
Thank you. So Lindsay, as they mentioned, it's more than just the transcript. So can you talk about how other factors weigh into the admissions process? For example, being a legacy or maybe a first generation college student?
Yeah, so there are many other factors that can really weigh into a college decision, and these will also vary from college to college, right? At some schools, they could be looking at those alumni relationships. They could be looking at your family's educational background, or potentially they're looking at your expressed interest in attending the institution, a personal interview they might conduct, et cetera. So there's lots of different things colleges could be looking at that you might not be initially thinking about. At Michigan, when it comes to some of those things, for example, like alumni relationships, that's not going to be a determining factor in making a decision. We have over 500,000 living alumni across the globe. So having a parent or sibling who went to the University of Michigan does not alone increase your chances of gaining admission to the university. How alumni relationships, though, are viewed, again, will vary from institution to institution, but like other factors that we've talked about, academics, grades, those types of things, will typically play a much larger role in the admissions decision. Now, when it comes to considering those other potential factors, though, institutions are also looking to really bring in certain types of students to their campuses, really, students who may have those unique or diverse experiences that would bring something new or contribute something potentially different to their student body. So this could be a student who is going to be the first in their family to attend college, but there's many other or different backgrounds and experiences students could highlight in application that colleges may pay more attention or closer attention to in the review process. So at Michigan, we really encourage students to use the essay portions of the application to highlight what they would want to bring to our campus or contribute to our community that may be different or unique compared to their peers. Other schools may learn about this information through that interview process or through communications they're having with the student. But in general, if you ever have questions about what a school is considering in the review process, rather than potentially listening to rumors or other things you're seeing on the internet, it really is best to just reach out to the school's admissions office directly, and they'll give you the most accurate information about what really they're considering when they're reviewing those students.
Great, thank you. So the next question's for you, Stephanie. If I'm applying to a school that is test optional, should I still turn in my test score if I have one, and will it be used in the process if I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. You'll see this year in particular, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that many schools have implemented test optional policies, even at institutions that haven't historically had a test optional policy. So it's good, as Lindsay said, it all depends across each college and university. So it's a good thing to do to put on your checklist to make sure you're aware of all of the policies of the schools that you're looking at. Generally, if you submit a test score, it is going to be reviewed as part of your process. It is your prerogative and your choice as to whether or not you submit it. So if it's a test optional school and you don't want to submit that standardized test score, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to. And if you feel like, on the other hand, actually my standardized test score might be a strength for me and I might want to submit it, then you can submit it. So don't feel like just because a school has moved to test optional that you can't submit testing, but also know that it's an option for you to not have to if you don't want to. So it sort of works in either direction, just kind of depending on your own unique application. It's a good conversation to have with your college counselor, or as Lindsay mentioned, by calling the individual school and getting a better sense of what their policies and requirements are.
Thank you. So, Lindsay, beyond admission, so once you've maybe gained admission into your schools or schools of choice, what factors will determine if I receive a scholarship or broadly financial aid?
Yeah, so in terms of scholarship consideration, again, kind of as has been the theme with many of these questions, colleges are all unique and we all have our own policies. So it's really hard to just kind of broadly talk about scholarships for all colleges, since all scholarships will consider different factors when awarding scholarships. They have different scholarships to give out and different policies. So again, that's one of those things when you're doing your research into your college list and into those institutions that you're most considering, you really want to have that understanding of what their merit scholarship policies are, what their financial aid policies are there additional applications you might have to submit to be considered for those types of things. At Michigan, for example, our admission application really doubles as a scholarship application for most of the scholarships that we offer. So it might even be the case at institutions where you don't have to do that extra work to be considered for those scholarships. But then in other cases, there may be additional applications that you do need to submit to institutions and certain deadlines that you have to submit those by. So you just want to be on top of the process if you want to be considered for all potential scholarships or aid the school offers. And then the factors are going to vary again. Many schools will use that same type of holistic process when they're giving away their scholarships. So again, they're considering many factors. Scholarships typically aren't just based off of one specific thing. It could be a combination of your academics and other things in your essays or your involvements or your personal background. So that's just something that you'll want to institution to institution. And then many institutions will have really robust need-based financial aid packages. So again, at Michigan, for example, we don't necessarily have a law in terms of merit scholarships for students. It's a very competitive merit scholarship process because we are very focused on making school affordable and giving out as much need-based financial aid as we can to students. So we highly encourage students to go through both processes. But in the end, really, when you're considering these scholarships and these financial aids, the best advice I can give to students is don't cross off an institution because you're not sure if you're going to receive a scholarship or you're not sure what kind of financial aid they can provide you. Really go through the whole process, work with the institution, and then wait until the end to see what does that package look like, what are my costs going to be there, before really deciding if it's going to be a good fit for you, because crossing off institutions before you even know if it is going to be affordable really isn't going to help you narrow down that list or find that best college fit.
Great. Thank you. Chris, can you explain early decision, early action, and other terms regarding admissions programs?
Sure. So when a student is starting the college search process, there's often these terms that come up like early decision or early action, and they can get pretty confusing. I tend to group decision rounds into 4 large buckets. So the first one is early decision. For folks who are starting the process, early decision is a binding commitment. It usually has, as the name would imply, an earlier deadline. So you want to watch out for things like this because they might be due in November, in December, and it's a thing where you definitely want to work with your college counselor to kind of figure out what school you might want to apply to. The other thing with early decision is that you typically only apply to one school early decision. It is because it's a binding commitment. You can't commit to more than one school at a time. And so you really want to be careful about which school you apply to, because if you are admitted to that school through the early decision process, you are bound to attend that school. There are some outs for things like financial considerations and things like that. But in general, you are making a statement saying, I really think that this school is a great choice for me. It's a great fit. I would love to attend if admitted. So that's kind of what early decision is all about. Early action is a similar program in that it has an earlier deadline typically, but it is non-binding. So it's much like the kind of typical admission process that you would think of in terms of submit an application a little bit earlier, you hear back a little bit earlier, but you still have until May 1st, generally speaking, until to make that commitment. And so there are schools that have different variations of this program. As you're taking a look, you might find things called restrictive early action or single choice early action. So you definitely want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper to figure out exactly what the restrictions are or what you're allowed to do or not do. Most students, when they're applying through the process, will come across something called regular decision. These are typically the applications that are due after January, kind of around that deadline, and they will get back to you in mid-March, maybe late March, and you have until May 1st to respond. So this is the format that most students are typically familiar with when they think about the college application process. The fourth kind of bucket that we have is called rolling admission. There are schools that are out there that will open up a window and start accepting applications at a particular point and start releasing decisions kind of as soon as they can make them. And that is a continuous process. So as opposed to early decision, early action, and regular decision, you will actually have decisions coming out on an ongoing basis, and there's no necessarily set deadline of when you have to turn in applications by. Of course, there are variations to each of these programs. So again, talk to your college counselor, do some research, talk to the schools themselves, and kind of get the nitty-gritty of the details of them, but those are kind of the broad strokes.
Thank you. And my last question for each of you is, what changes to the admissions process, now whether that's application or review, is your college considering for fall 2021 due to COVID?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So at Williams, we have implemented a one-year test optional policy. So exactly what I was just speaking about prior. So we will not require standardized testing for students who are applying in the 2020-2021 year. That's a one-year policy, but it's certainly something that I think will be really helpful for students who haven't been able to take advantage of standardized testing. We're also going to be really flexible in working with students and each of their schools, understanding that grades have shifted pretty dramatically. The way online learning has taken place in each school is really different. So we'll always be thinking about the student's individual context and the school setting and the policies and practices that they've chosen to implement during this difficult time.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Yeah, so for the University of Michigan, you know, it's a difficult question to answer just because things are so uncertain, and certainly everyone across the university is in talks about how things will need to change. I mean, it's not a question of if, it's how are things going to need to change. We know that students are currently being impacted, and it will impact how they're applying to institutions. So we do recognize that adjustments will likely need to be made. We just don't necessarily have anything concrete to share yet. In terms of what we're potentially considering, I don't necessarily think that we're an institution that would go to test optional at this point. Again, everything could potentially change. So we are still hoping that students will have opportunities to test later on the summer or later in the fall to still be able to potentially submit some sort of testing for their applications if they're applying to Michigan in our early or regular deadlines. But I do think there will have to be adjustments made just in terms of the flexibility of some of our timelines and things like that. And also, as Steph mentioned, just when you're looking at students' applications who are in the midst of getting these online grades or not getting grades for this semester, we certainly will have to be more understanding to how we're going to view those students and, not necessarily penalize students who don't have grades for this semester because their school wasn't offering them. So those kind of things will be taken into consideration. We just unfortunately don't have anything concrete to share yet, but as we do develop policies and have things to share with students, we'll certainly make sure we let them know and make things very clear on our website and through our communications with the students who are going to be applying.
Yeah, and I would jump on that and say, I think for us at Northwestern, we're very similar to Michigan in that we don't have any formal policy changes to be announced or kind of nothing in the works. And part of it is, honestly, I understand the frustration and kind of the curiosity from students. From our end, we just really don't know the impact that it's having yet in full scope. And we're trying to respond the best that we can, but we're not kind of announcing formal policy changes until we get a better sense of how that goes. That being said, though, I think to echo a theme, I would hope institutions are very kind of sensitive to this idea of context that Stephanie mentioned, and we want to know your stories. We are very curious about how this has impacted you as students, and we're very receptive to having you tell us that story either through a personal essay, an optional short answer, a counselor letter of recommendation. There are multiple venues for that. But I think we're actively trying to get a sense of how that landscape looks for you as a student applying to college. And we're fortunate that we have the ability to kind of read those and get to know students a little bit through the application process. And every student has different circumstances. They're responding to them in different ways. So if there's particularly things that you want us to know about, let us know on the application, and we'll take that into account when we're reading your application. But I think in general, when we're taking a look at things like this entire COVID response, as Michigan was saying, like really the website is going to be kind of our go-to place for up-to-date information. If we announce new things or kind of want to let students know, we'll probably get to them through the website because it's just the fastest way to kind of let a mass audience know about any updates that we have.
Thank you. Thank you for your advice and your insights today. It was great. I'm sure our students will really appreciate that. And again, thank you for your time and thank you for being members of the coalition.